5 Japanese warships, 1 American destroyer. The mathematics of that engagement should have produced only one outcome: swift, total annihilation. And yet, on the morning of October 25, 1944, in the gray, churning waters of the Sibuyan Sea off the coast of Samar in the Philippines, one ship refused to accept those mathematics. This is the story of the USS Johnston, destroyer DD-557, and the men who sailed her into history. The battle off Samar was not supposed to happen. It was not planned, not anticipated, and by every tactical calculation, it should never have been survivable. What unfolded that morning was something that military historians would spend decades trying to fully explain, not in terms of tactics or logistics, but in terms of sheer, inexhaustible human will. The centerpiece of this operation was the largest naval battle in history, the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Spanning 4 separate engagements across 3 days, it would involve over 300 ships and decide the fate of the Pacific War. The Japanese, fully aware that losing the Philippines would sever their empire's supply lines and seal their ultimate defeat, committed nearly their entire remaining naval strength to stopping the American landings at Leyte Gulf. Their plan, called Shogo-1, meaning Operation Victory, was audacious, complex, and desperate in equal measure. One element of that plan was a powerful surface force known as Center Force, commanded by Vice Admiral Kakeo Kurita. It included the 2 largest battleships ever built, the Yamato and the Musashi, along with additional battleships, heavy cruisers, and destroyers. This force was designed to punch through San Bernardino Strait under cover of darkness, sweep south along the Philippine coast, and annihilate the American landing forces at Leyte Gulf. Standing between Kurita's armada and those vulnerable landing ships was a small collection of escort carrier groups called Taffy 3, officially designated Task Unit 77.4.3. commanded by Rear Admiral Clifton Spragg. Taffy 3 consisted of 6 slow, lightly armored escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. These were not combat vessels in the traditional sense. The escort carriers were converted merchant hulls, barely capable of 17 knots. The destroyers carried 5-inch guns against an enemy force bristling with 18-inch rifles that could hurl shells weighing as much as a small automobile. One of those 3 destroyers was the USS Johnston. Her commander was Commander Ernest Edwin Evans, a man whose entire life had pointed toward this moment, though he could never have known it. Born in Pawnee, Oklahoma, of Cherokee descent, Evans had graduated from the Naval Academy in 1931. He was described by those who served under him as fierce, demanding, and utterly fearless. When he took command of the Johnston in October 1943, he told his crew, "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." No one got off. The morning of October 25th began like any other in the Philippine Sea. Gray skies, moderate swells, the slow routine of a fleet standing watch. At 06:37 hours, radar operators aboard the ships of Taffy 3 began picking up contacts, large contacts moving fast from the north. Rear Admiral Sprague initially dismissed them as aircraft returns from friendly forces. Then the shells began falling. At 06:58 hours, towering colored waterspouts erupted around the escort carriers, the dye-marked ranging shots of Japanese battleship guns. Each Japanese ship fired shells dyed a different color so gunners could spot their own splashes and correct their aim. Blue, yellow, green, and red columns of water rose 60 feet into the air around the slow, helpless carriers. Kurita's center force had found them. Sprague's first order was to run. He turned his ships southeast into the wind, ordering the carriers to launch every available aircraft while laying a smokescreen. At the same time, he transmitted a desperate radio call for assistance to anyone within range. Little did those men know that help was hours away. They were alone. Kurita's force bearing down on Taffy 3 was staggering in its scale. The Yamato alone displaced 72,000 tons fully loaded and carried 9 18-inch guns in 3 triple turrets. She was accompanied by the battleship Nagato, the heavy cruisers Haguro, Chokai, Chikuma, and Tone, and a screen of destroyers. In total, Kurita commanded 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers, a force capable of destroying the entire United States Pacific Fleet as it existed in 1941. Against this, Taffy 3 had 6 escort carriers and 7 small combatants. Commander Ernest Evans did not hesitate. At 07:16 hours, without waiting for orders, Evans turned the Johnston out of the formation and drove her directly toward the oncoming Japanese fleet. He ordered flank speed, every pound of steam her boilers could produce, and opened fire with her 5-inch guns at a range of 18,000 yards. A 5-inch shell against a battleship's armor plate is, in practical terms, the equivalent of throwing a stone at a concrete wall. Evans knew this. He fired anyway. "Prepare to fire torpedoes," he ordered. The Johnston raced toward the heavy cruiser Kumano at 30 knots, cutting through the water under a hail of incoming fire. At 07:30 hours, at a range of just 9,000 yards, suicidally close, Evans launched all 10 of Johnston's Mark 15 torpedoes in a single spread at the Japanese formation. 3 torpedoes struck the Kumano. The heavy cruiser's bow was blown off. She fell out of formation and played no further role in the battle. Then the Japanese found the Johnston. 3 14-inch shells from the battleship Congo struck her in rapid succession. The blasts destroyed the forward fire room, knocked out 3 of her 4 boilers, and reduced her speed from 30 knots to 17. A minute later, 3 more shells, these from a cruiser, tore through her bridge area. Evans lost 2 fingers on his left hand. Shrapnel lacerated his face and chest. He refused to leave the bridge. With the Johnston damaged and trailing smoke, the Japanese appeared to lose interest in her momentarily, assuming perhaps that she was finished. She was not finished. Evans ordered his surviving engineers to coax every possible knot from the remaining boilers and drove back into the fight. By 0800 hours, the situation had moved beyond desperate into something approaching catastrophe. The Japanese cruisers had closed to within 14,000 yards of the escort carriers. Their shells were landing among the carriers with increasing accuracy. The carriers, built to support operations, not survive combat, could not absorb this punishment much longer. If they were destroyed, the landing force at Leyte Gulf would be exposed. The entire Philippine invasion, years of planning, thousands of lives already spent, hung in the balance. Rear Admiral Sprague ordered his 3 destroyers, the Johnston, the Hole, and the Heermann, and his 4 destroyer escorts to attack. It was an order he later described as sending men to their deaths. He issued it anyway. The destroyer USS Hole charged the Japanese line and absorbed 40 hits before she finally went under. The destroyer escort Samuel B. Roberts earned the nickname the destroyer escort that fought like a battleship before being torn apart by cruiser fire. Ships were dying around the Johnston on every side. Fear gripped the men, but training and duty held them at their stations. Evans conned the Johnston through the chaos with extraordinary skill, interposing her between the Japanese cruisers and the carriers, firing her guns at point-blank range, drawing fire onto herself to protect the slower ships. The Johnston's crew fired over 200 rounds from their 5-inch guns during the battle.
At times, Japanese destroyers were so close that the Johnston's crew fought them off with 40mm anti-aircraft guns. By 08:20 hours, the Johnston had expended all torpedoes, was down to 2 functioning 5-inch guns, and was taking damage from multiple directions simultaneously.
Her engine room was flooding. Her speed had dropped to barely 15 knots. Evans had now lost the fingers on his right hand as well, and was directing the battle from the fantail, shouting orders down to the helm through an open hatch. And still, the Johnston fired. At 09:13 hours, something extraordinary happened. Admiral Kurita, surveying the chaos of the battle from aboard the Yamato, made a decision that would alter the course of the Pacific War. Confused by the ferocity of the American resistance, misled by radio intercepts suggesting that major American fleet units were closing in, and exhausted after days of combat, he ordered Center Force to withdraw. The entire Japanese armada turned north. The escort carriers of Taffy 3, battered, trailing smoke, their decks scarred by near misses, watched in disbelief as the greatest surface fleet deployed in the Pacific War turned away from them. The Johnston had played a central role in creating that confusion. Her torpedo attack had disrupted Kurita's formation and delayed the advance. Her relentless gun attacks had drawn the attention of cruisers that should have been engaging the carriers. Her refusal to die, against all probability, had helped convince Kurita that he faced a far larger force than actually existed. But for the Johnston herself, the battle was not yet over. Even as the main Japanese force withdrew, 3 Japanese destroyers converged on the crippled Johnston. Without torpedoes, down to minimal ammunition, barely making way, Evans continued to fight. His crew fought with him. At 09:45 hours, the Johnston went dead in the water. Evans gave the order to abandon ship. As the crew went over the side, a Japanese destroyer came alongside. According to survivors, her captain stood on the bridge and saluted the sinking Johnston. Evans himself was last seen swimming among the survivors. He was never found. The USS Johnston sank at approximately 10:10 hours on October 25, 1944, in the Philippine Sea. Of her crew of 327 men, 186 survived. Commander Ernest Evans and 141 of his men went down with her or were lost in the water afterward. The battle off Samar, the small piece of Lady Gulf fought by Taffy 3, is widely regarded as one of the most remarkable naval engagements in history. Against a force of overwhelmingly superior firepower, a handful of small ships with extraordinary crews prevented the destruction of the Lady Gulf landing force, and with it, the probable prolongation of the Pacific War by months or years. Commander Ernest Edwin Evans was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, the United States military's highest decoration. His citation read, in part, that he had displayed consummate skill in maneuvering his vessel and by his outstanding courage in the face of the overwhelming odds contributed substantially to the success of the action. He was the first Native American officer in the United States Navy to receive the Medal of Honor. The USS Johnston was located on the seafloor in 2019 by explorer Victor Vescovo, lying at a depth of over 21,000 feet, one of the deepest known shipwrecks on Earth. She rests where she fought. A single destroyer, 5 warships hunting her, and a crew that simply refused to stop fighting. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, America and WWII Stories, as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.